Hello GCSE students, this is the next video on Stave 1 of A Christmas Carol. The section that you can see on the screen is what I'm going to talk you through now, and the reading of this you can see is here on YouTube already, titled A Christmas Carol, Stave 1, a reading of Fred, Scrooge and the men from the charity. So that's what we're looking at now. Because that reading is there, I'm not going to read it again here. This particular section begins with the uncle at the top here, who is Scrooge, telling his nephew Fred that he views Christmas as a drain on his resources. It's a time for paying bills without money, a time for getting older but not richer, a time for balancing the books effectively. So Christmas for Scrooge is a time of financial deprivation. It's a time when people spend money that they don't have. Maybe one of the reasons that Christmas Carol is still relevant is because of phrases and moments like this, where I think it's possible to argue that many people will still feel the same way. However, what many people won't do is say that anyone who goes around with Merry Christmas on his lips should be boiled with his own pudding and buried with a stake of holly through his heart. That's a line which characterises Scrooge perfectly as a miser, as a stingy, odious, hard, unfeeling, uncaring person. What does the line itself actually what does it actually imply? Well, in folklore, it would have been the case that you could murder or make a vampire die through stabbing them in the heart, often with a crucifix. And here we can see how Dickens is subverting that folklore and suggesting that those people who like Christmas are sort of vampire-like people. They're leeches who drain the resources of others. That's what a vampire does. A vampire sucks the blood of another person, and in sucking the blood of another person sustains their own life. Therefore Scrooge and Dickens, but particularly Scrooge here, through Scrooge, Dickens is suggesting that for some, Christmas is a time when we drain our resources. So that's why Scrooge continues by saying, let me keep it in my way. Let me celebrate Christmas the way I want to. His nephew replies, but you don't keep it. And by keep, what they're really meaning is it's a euphemism. It's a euphemism for celebrate. You don't celebrate it. Scrooge's reasoning for his refusing to celebrate Christmas is that it has never done him any good. He says to his nephew, much good has it ever done you. So celebrating Christmas for Fred, he suggests, has never done him any good, and therefore what's the point? And so Fred here, in this longer speech, and the length of the speech is interesting because it captures Fred's passion. He's able to speak for 4, 5, 6 lines off the cuff on the importance of Christmas. What does he say? There are many things from which I might have derived good, by which I have not profited, I dare say. There are many things that have done me well, even if I haven't actually got anything out of it. Even if I haven't actually got any money from it, he says. So Fred here encapsulates a way of thinking that tells us really that money, profit, capital is not the be-all and the end-all. Then he goes on to evoke, to speak of the importance of Christmas. He says, I have always thought of Christmas time, when it has come around, apart from the religious side of things, apart from the veneration due to its sacred name and origin, apart from its Christian origins, the birth of Christ, he says, I've always thought of Christmas as a good time. So we're from here on, a kind, forgiving, charitable, pleasant time. The only time I know of in the long calendar of the year when men and women by one consent, seem by one consent to open their shut-up hearts freely, and to think of people below them as if they really were fellow passengers to the grave. So Fred here is telling us, and Dickens is telling us, through the construct that is Fred, that Christmas is the one time of the year when people have compassion, when they belong to a community, when they see themselves as more than just themselves and their own. We belong to something bigger, something grander, something more important that outstrips and outweighs any selfishness that we have. So Fred becomes, I think, Dickens's mouthpiece at this particular moment. That's what Christmas is for. That's why it's important. That's why we must cherish it, because it makes us better. And therefore, as I read on, though it hasn't really ever made him richer, he says, I believe that it has done me good and will do me good. So Dickens here is giving us a little nod in the right direction with these italicized words, has and will, as to how to read it. That Fred is a powerful speaker. And I deliberately jumped to that section because Dickens says it himself. He says, "You are quite a powerful speaker, sir. I wonder you don't go into Parliament." I love that line. It's so funny. You might not think it's funny. I think it's funny. And it's deliberately meant to be funny because what we have here is satire. Satire. S-A-T-I-R-E. This is a satirical comment. Dickens appears to be suggesting that powerful speaking has the opportunity or the tendency to convince us. It also reveals Scrooge's cynicism about words. Words are used to convince people and change their mind, and with words, and if you have the power to change someone's mind, why don't you go into Parliament to become a minister? So we have a little bit of satire there. What is satire? That's something I'm going to go and ask that you go away and look up as a short task that comes out of this video. Of course, in the middle of there, I've skipped over the section where the clerk in the tank, who we will come to know as Bob Cratchit, involuntarily applauds. So in the reading video, I ensured that there was this moment where we have clapping. The involuntarily, the adverb, involuntarily is the important bit there, because it tells us that he does it without thinking. Fred's speech is so significant, it's so powerful, so important, that at this stage, the nameless Bob Cratchit, he's just a clerk in the tank, claps. And that's because Fred, with his power of speech, with his ability to manipulate words effectively, he becomes a sort of spokesperson, really. He becomes not just a mouthpiece for Dickens, but also a mouthpiece for characters and people like Bob Cratchit. Bob Cratchit, who represents the deserving poor. We have two different types of poor, I think, in this text and throughout the Victorian period. And Dickens seeks to expose those two groups, the deserving poor and the undeserving poor. Bob Cratchit arguably belongs to the deserving poor because he is poor, but he works hard. He provides for his large family. Much of the rest of the text is concerned with the undeserving poor, people who are, of course, poor, but according to a more cynical view of life, do not help themselves, do not do anything to try and escape their situation. And so as we move through the rest of this particular section, we're going to see how the charitable gentlemen, those men from the charity who ask Scrooge to donate some money, They are effectively asking Scrooge to donate some money to the undeserving poor, people who don't have anything, and Scrooge will refuse to do that. Now, I'm going to come back to that in a few moments, because it helps to go through this sort of reasonably chronologically, I think, for the purposes of videos like this. So in the middle there, I said that I skipped over the involuntary applause. We see how the fire is extinguished forever. So we have this reinforcement of coldness, and Scrooge issues a threat. Let me hear another sound from you, and you'll keep your Christmas by losing your situation. So he threatens Bob Cratchit with the loss of his job, further reinforcing Scrooge as an unsympathetic character who lacks compassion. And the whole purpose of the text is for us to see Scrooge go on that journey of redemption, so that he becomes a man who has compassion, who belongs to a community, who sees society as something bigger than himself. We then move on to the issue of relationships. Scrooge asks, "Why did you get married?" "Because you fell in love," he says, with a growl. So we can see here with this, "because you fell in love," growled Scrooge, that Scrooge perceives love and views love as a nonsense. And that's why he wishes his nephew a good afternoon. And in the repetition of good afternoon, which we have here, and here again, you can see me highlighting on the screen, 2, 3, 4, 5 times even, it's a cold dismissal of his nephew. It's a go away, good afternoon. But again, the repetition of the same phrase reveals Scrooge's sparseness of language. So where Fred earlier on had that long speech, comparatively long speech, here his verboseness, his verbosity, so to be verbose, verbose, to be verbose is to be wordy, signifies sort of Fred's, the French word would be joie de vivre, French phrase. It means passion for life, joie de vivre. I'm probably butchering the pronunciation there, I'm sorry. And Scrooge's short, guttural, harsh declarations of good afternoon, go away, reveal the contrasts in their characters. So Fred has extended the invitation to Scrooge to come to Christmas dinner with he and his wife and his friends. Scrooge has told him in no uncertain terms, go away. Fred then leaves. He wishes a Merry Christmas to the clerk. He bestows the greetings of the seasons on Bob Cratchit. Scrooge says that he'll retire to Bedlam. Now, if you walk into a classroom and there's chairs on the table, and there's one outside the room, and there's litter everywhere, and people are running around the room, one might refer to a classroom being like Bedlam. Bedlam was once the name given to a sort of a lunatic asylum. So a teacher would be referring there to their classroom as being like Bedlam, to refer to the sort of the lunacy or the craziness, the unkempt nature of the environment that they were walking into. So what we have there is this lunatic, Fred, described as a lunatic, quite a harsh sort of phrase, I think, to refer to somebody who was just being full of the joys of life that Christmas bring out. He goes, and 2 other people come in. Who are they? These are the charitable gentlemen who I was referring to earlier. They are described as portly, which means round, rotund, perhaps signifying their wealth, well-fed gentlemen. Pleasant to look at, so well-dressed, smiling faces. They've got their hats off, sign of respect, and they bow. So Dickens is establishing here that these people are, yeah, they're going to ask for something, but they're doing it with politeness and respect and deference. They're not demanding of Scrooge. They're asking. So we have that section there where they sort of say, well, "Who are you?" and he tells them that Marley's been dead for 7 years. As we move on, necessarily I'm going to have to skip some moments. They ask Scrooge. They say, "It is more than usually desirable that we should make some slight provision for the poor and the destitute who suffer greatly at the present time." Scrooge asks, "Are there no prisons? And the union workhouses? Are they still in operation?" So Scrooge here, these are perhaps two of the most famous lines in the text. Are there no prisons? And the union workhouses? Are there no workhouses? Are they still in existence? Scrooge here is saying that he does his bit. He pays his taxes. And he doesn't want to do any more than that. So Dickens is using the portly gentleman and Scrooge himself to demonstrate how those who have the means to do good, those who have money and who could be benevolent, who could be philanthropists, who could give their money generously, people who are just so obscenely and extremely wealthy that they can give it to others who need it more. That's Dickens wants that to happen. Scrooge represents that body of people who have means but refuse to distribute their wealth to any degree at all. Why? He says that he does his bit. So I think in the previous video I spoke about the poor laws and asked you to go and look those up. And you will have found that the poor laws created two things. The workhouses, which were where people went voluntarily of their own free will and choice, and the debtors' prisons, where you didn't go of your own free will and choice, just like with prisons these days. So Scrooge feels that he does his bit already. The point being, though, that Scrooge asks the two gentlemen, are those parts of the poor law, are they still in operation? Are they still happening? Are they still doing what they're supposed to be doing? They say, the gentlemen say, "Both very busy, sir." Scrooge was worried, he says, that maybe they hadn't done what they were supposed to do. The two gentlemen reply, under the impression that they scarcely furnish Christian cheer of mind or body to the multitude. What does that mean? And this is one of the challenges with Dickens, is that sometimes students over the last number of years would read this and go, "Oh, I don't know what it means." But it's quite simple, really. And once you become attuned to the language, you'll find that the text becomes much more straightforward as well. What does it mean? As a translation, it means under the impression that they don't really look after the many. They don't look after the mind or the body of the many, the multitude. A few of us are trying to raise a fund to buy the poor some meat and drink and some means of warmth. We're doing it now at Christmas because Christmas is a time when people want things, want is keenly felt, and abundance rejoices. So people want things and there are lots of resources around. Christmas is a time when people in need more, and those who have more have even more than usual. Perhaps the mistake that the portly gentlemen make is that they say, "Well, what shall I put you down for?" They rather assume, but still. What shall I put you down for? They assume Scrooge will give. Scrooge says nothing. He doesn't wish to be anonymous. He doesn't wish to make a donation without anybody knowing who he is. Some people like to donate and not have a sort of fanfare and not have everyone know how much they have given. Not everybody wants fame or to be known to do good things. Scrooge says, Leave me alone. I don't make merry myself. I don't celebrate Christmas, and I can't afford to make idle people merry. And it's that line there, I can't afford to make idle people merry, which I keep saying encapsulates, but I'll say it again. That encapsulates Scrooge's attitude to Christmas and to other people. I'm not supporting lazy oiks, is what he says. I'm pausing there because you will know that there are people in this world who feel like this today. Um, People who want to only help others who they deem as being worthy of their extra help. And it's just a slightly odd way to look at the world, isn't it? I mean, who are any of us to judge who needs help and who doesn't need help? I mean, I'm making these videos in the time of the lockdown due to COVID-19, the pandemic, which is reinforcing that some people have lots and other people don't have very much at all. I wouldn't personally feel very comfortable to just decide who needs resources and who doesn't. Um, and I would feel very uncomfortable about saying that people who are struggling at the moment, it's because of their own laziness, their own lack of desire to work, their own lack of ability, their own ineptitude. Ooh, I'm not sure about that. Of course, people pay their taxes, which is what Scrooge does. He says, I help to support the established I have mentioned. They cost enough. My taxes cost enough, he says. But, gosh, that's a spectacularly unsympathetic lens through which to view the world. And evidently, I feel that's what Dickens is showing his readers. Look how flawed a character Scrooge is. Look how wrong his views are. Look how myopic he is. So Scrooge is myopic, 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 which means to be short-sighted. Scrooge is so short-sighted, he's so myopic, he's so full of myopia that he has forgotten what it means to be a human being. And this is going to become all the more appalling and abhorrent later in the text when we see that Scrooge himself was a character, was a younger person who would have benefited from the benevolence, the kindness, the philanthropic efforts of others. The two men from the charity, the two portly gentlemen, say, many can't go to those workhouses. They can't go there. They don't want to, but many would rather die than go there. And here is a line that many students instinctively remember, and for very good reason. It's a great line. It's an awful line. It's a horrible line in terms of what it says, but in terms of your knowledge about the text, there's a reason that students always know this one. Scrooge says, if they would rather die, they had better do it and decrease the surplus population. Again, the pause there, because just think about what he said. If some people want to die, they might as well do it, and will decrease the fact that there are already too many people on this earth. And it's at this stage that I'm going to draw your attention to the economist and philosopher Thomas Malthus. Malthus being spelt Malthus, because here Dickens constructs Scrooge as a Malthusian figure, a Malthusian character. Scrooge embodies the Malthusian economic and philosophical principle. And I'm going to go and ask that you look that up as an offshoot of looking at this video. What does that mean, to be a Malthusian figure? Scrooge says, besides, excuse me, I don't know. I don't know that they would rather die. It's not my fault, not my responsibility, he says. Nothing to do with me, boss. And the men return, but you might know it. So we can see Scrooge's myopic nature being reinforced once more. Nothing to do with me, he says. And they respond, but you could know it. Don't turn away. Don't shut yourself in your office, is almost the message here. Be a member of the community. Be a member of a society. Join in. That's what Dickens is telling us, the reader, through the character of Scrooge and through the characters of the portly gentleman. Scrooge's excuse is, it's not my business. Nothing to do with me. It's enough for a man to understand his own business and not to interfere with other people's. Mine occupies me constantly. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Go away. Goodbye. I'm done with you. So Scrooge's inherent selfishness, his insular, isolated nature is accentuated in those lines. It's enough for me to know my own business and not to interfere. Another interesting word choice. Scrooge views those men as interfering in the business of other people. And I think Dickens would like us, the reader, again, to see that, well, it's not interfering, is it? If any of you have had, conversations with your neighbours that you haven't had previously, if you've had neighbours help, if you have helped your elderly neighbours, perhaps, as younger people, or your parents have, are you interfering busybodies? Or are you kind, good, honest, benevolent people who are looking out for the welfare of others? Scrooge would view you as an interfering busybody. And it's obvious just how wrong-headed that line of thought is. Seeing clearly that it would be useless to pursue their point, the gentlemen go. And Scrooge gets on with his work, feeling better about himself, but in a more facetious temper. So he feels better about himself, but his mood has been changed. He's been made angry and irritable by what they have asked of him. So a longish video here, and necessarily a longish one, because this is the crux of the text. We need to really understand the beginning of the text, so that as we move on, we fully comprehend why Scrooge has to change, how he has to change, and the ways in which the visitations of the ghosts, Marley, the ghost of Christmas past, the ghost of Christmas present, the ghost of Christmas yet to come, how their visitations will enact and enable that redemption, the redemption of Scrooge's character. That's it for now. Questions to follow. Enjoy. Hope it all makes good sense. If you have any questions, ask. And remember, if there's anything that you're unsure of, or if you want videos on a particular part of the text or something re-explained, please make a request via email to me. Thanks very much.